I knew something was wrong the moment Elise leaned back in her chair, lifted her chin like she was posing for a magazine, and delivered her line with that soft, performative accent she used whenever she wanted to seem sophisticated. "Get us some coffee, please," she said, her smile all Parisian charm and sharpened intent. The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me, Aurora Hale. The woman who had spent 3 months preparing the projections and cultural notes for this negotiation, now reduced to a command meant to push me out of the room. I stayed where I was. Elise's smile tightened. "Aurora," she added, still sweet. The coffee, Monsieur Delatour, seated across from her, shifted slightly. His eyes moved from Elise's lips to my face, as if he felt the weight behind the words. He had always been perceptive in our email exchanges, always reading what people tried to hide. I exhaled slowly. "Monsieur Delatour," I said, turning to him. "Si vous permettez." Elise's posture snapped straight. "Aurora, this is not the time." But he lifted a hand. "Let her speak," he said in French, without looking at her. The pulse in my throat hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. I continued, choosing each word carefully, explaining in his language what he had not been shown, what had been omitted, what he deserved to know before trusting anyone in this room. I told him the truth, not dressed up, not softened. Delatour listened without interrupting. His eyes narrowed, focused, weighing everything I had just revealed. Then he stood. The scrape of his chair might as well have split the table in half. Elise's breath hitched. Someone dropped a pen. Every face turned white. Delatour straightened his jacket, looked around the room, and spoke in clear, unshaken English. "Cancel the deal." No one moved. Elise's hands trembled against her notes. My own heartbeat roared until it drowned out every sound except his footsteps leaving the room. I did not follow him. I did not apologize. I simply stood there, wondering if the truth I had spoken had saved something or if it had just set my entire career on fire. And 48 hours earlier, none of this had even begun. I grew up in Charleston, close enough to the harbor that the sound of cargo horns felt like part of my heartbeat. Maybe that was why I ended up in logistics. Maybe it was why France fit so naturally when I moved to Lyon for school. Languages had always been the easiest part of my life. People were harder. "Aurora, darling, could you bring the updated numbers?" Elise called from her glass-walled office, her voice floating out like perfume, pretty but suffocating. I stepped inside, folder in hand. "They are revised. Delatour Maritime will want a clearer breakdown on the last quarter." Elise gave a light laugh. Yes. The French. So emotional about details." She waved her hand in a vague little circle, the kind meant to look European. "I know them." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Monsieur Delatour is not emotional. He is cautious. He told me." She cut me off with a bright smile. "Aurora, sweetheart. It is pronounced de la tour. You make it sound too American." "That is the actual pronunciation," I said quietly. Elise's smile froze for half a second before smoothing out. "Well, I suppose accents are subjective." They were not, but correcting her would only tighten the leash she already kept around me. She flipped through the folder without really reading. "You can sit in on the negotiation, but stay near the wall. They need to see one leader, one voice." She looked at her reflection in the window, adjusting her blazer. "And that is me." I stayed silent. 2 days earlier, she had introduced me to a visiting supplier as my assistant who organizes my notes. Last month, she had repeated a French phrase incorrectly in a meeting, then insisted I was the one mistaken. 3 weeks before that, I had saved a contract worth nearly $200,000, and she told the board the success came from her new strategy. Each small moment pressed my space smaller. "Just be supportive tomorrow," she added, still gazing at herself. "And let me lead." I nodded once, holding the folder tightly. Some spaces shrink until there is no room left to stand. The morning before the negotiation, the conference floor buzzed louder than usual. Delatour Maritime was not just another name on our supplier list. Their contract controlled a large portion of our East Coast distribution, and every department knew it. Elise swept into the preparation room with a confidence that bordered on theatrical. "Team," she announced, "this is our moment. I will run the show, but I expect all of you to stay aligned with my direction." I handed her the binder I had built over the past weeks. "These are the cultural notes Monsieur Delatour requested." He was very specific about Elise raised a hand. "Aurora. Darling." I skimmed them. "They are sweet, but leaders do not drown in details. They guide through vision." I held the binder against my chest. Delatour sees details as respect. He said that himself on our last call. She smiled, the same smile that always meant she had dismissed me before I finished speaking. "We will be fine." Across the table, Jordan from finance leaned toward me. "She is leaning hard into the French theme," he whispered. "Did she always dress like that?" I glanced at Elise's tailored navy suit. The silk scarf knotted neatly at her throat. "Only since she took over this account." Jordan grimaced. "Right." Elise dimmed the lights and projected her presentation. The first few slides were harmless. Then one number caught my eye, a shipment forecast inflated by nearly 30%. Delatour had rejected that projection weeks ago. "Elise," I said carefully, "that figure is incorrect. It might come across as dismissive of his concerns." She did not look at me. "The number stays. It strengthens our position." "That is not how he sees it," I whispered. Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and impatient. "Aurora." I said, "it stays." I forced myself to swallow the warning rising in my throat. The negotiation was hours away, and the person steering the biggest deal of our year was already choosing the wrong map. Monsieur Delatour arrived with a quiet nod and a brief handshake. His expression measured in that way I had grown familiar with during our calls. Elise stepped forward instantly. "Bienvenue," she said, stretching the word like taffy. "We are honored you are here." Delatour paused before replying. "Merci," he said politely, then turned toward me. "Madam Hale, it is good to finally meet in person." Elise's smile flickered. "Aurora helps with internal coordination," she added quickly. "I will lead us today." Delatour's eyes lingered on me a moment longer before he took his seat. I could feel the shift, subtle but real. Elise felt it too. She launched into her presentation, her voice bright and practiced. "As you can see, our forecast shows Delatour raised a hand." "Pardon. The number on this slide. It does not match the file I reviewed with Madam Hale." Elise blinked. "Oh, that figure is aspirational." "It is inaccurate," Delatour said calmly. I opened my binder. "The updated projection is here." Elise cut me off with a tight laugh. "Aurora, that is not necessary. You are overwhelming our guest." Delatour's brows pulled together. "She is clarifying." A flush crept up Elise's neck. "We do not want confusion," she insisted. "Aurora, let me handle this." He leaned back, studying her. "Then answer. Please. Why the change?" Elise's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at me, panic behind her eyes. I waited, giving her space to answer. She did not. Instead, she turned her whole body toward me. "Aurora, be a dear and get us some coffee. Please?" The room stilled. My cheeks burned, but my feet stayed planted. The command dug into every old bruise she had ever left on my dignity. Delatour watched me carefully, waiting to see what I would do. I kept my binder in my hands. I did not move toward the door. Elise's voice sharpened. "Aurora." The coffee. I stayed rooted in place, feeling the invisible line between us shift for the first time, and I knew I would not step out of that room. Delatour's gaze stayed on me, steady and expectant, as if he had already sensed what Elise was trying to bury. I lifted my chin. "Monsieur Delatour," I said softly. Je vous remercie pour votre patience. Elise snapped. Aurora. English. You are confusing. He raised a hand without looking at her. Continue. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I felt it in my ribs. Vous aviez demandé les prévisions mises à jour la semaine dernière. I said. Je les ai préparées. Elles devaient être incluses aujourd'hui. I held the binder open so he could see the files he recognized. Elles ont été retirées de la présentation. Pas par erreur. A muscle near his jaw tightened. Retiré, he repeated quietly. Elise forced out an uneasy laugh. This is a misunderstanding. Aurora is emotional about data. Non, he said sharply. Ce n'est pas une émotion, c'est la vérité. His eyes shifted back to the slide behind Elise, the one she had inflated to make her pitch look stronger. You changed figures we discussed. You hid revisions I required. Elise's voice wavered. Monsieur Delatour, if you will allow me to explain. He stood. The scrape of his chair felt like a verdict. He buttoned his jacket with slow precision, then addressed the entire room. In English, he said. So, there is no confusion. Elise froze. He looked at me once, then at the table, then directly at her. Cancel the deal. Elise lurched forward. Monsieur Delatour, please, this is unnecessary. She misunderstood your request. He did not acknowledge her. He collected his folder, tucked it under his arm, and headed toward the door. The room stayed silent as the delegation followed, leaving only their footsteps and the echo of the words none of us could take back. Elise's breath came shallow and fast, her fingers trembling against her papers. And in the stillness that followed, all that remained was the truth I had just spoken out loud. The fallout began before Delatour even reached the parking lot. Phones rang, doors slammed, and voices rose across the floor like alarms. Elise stormed into the hallway, her heels hitting the tile so sharply the sound echoed. She ambushed me, she shouted to whoever would listen. Aurora sabotaged the negotiation. She undermined my authority in front of a major partner. I stood a few feet away, binder still in my hands. Elise caught sight of me and pointed like I was a threat. There she is. Ask her why she decided to destroy months of work. Jordan stepped between us. Elise, maybe we should— No, she snapped. The board needs to hear this today, within 20 minutes. HR and 2 senior executives called me into a small meeting room. Elise was already there, breathless and trembling with indignation. She launched in immediately. Her behavior was insubordinate. She misrepresented our strategy. She misled the supplier with information I never approved. I placed my binder on the table. I did not mislead anyone. I translated exactly what Monsieur Delatour had requested. Elise scoffed. Convenient. I opened the binder. These are the guidelines he asked for 6 weeks ago. I slid the first set of papers forward, each page time-stamped. I sent them to you the same day. One of the executives, Mr. Harding, scanned the pages. These dates match the time you forwarded the initial request. Elise, she stiffened. She is taking things out of context. I placed the next document down. Here are the corrected data projections. You deleted them from the shared drive and replaced them with your aspirational figures. A second executive frowned. Is that accurate? I laid out the final piece printed emails from Delatour, unanswered, sitting in Elise's inbox for nearly 10 days. Elise's voice broke. I was going to reply. Harding closed the binder gently. We need a moment. Elise swallowed hard, her bravado thinning, her eyes darting anywhere but toward me. The room no longer tilted in her favor, and for the first time since she arrived, the lies had nowhere left to hide. The executives reconvened that afternoon in a smaller, quieter room. Elise sat rigid in her chair, arms crossed so tightly it looked painful. I took the seat across from her, the binder resting on my lap like a final card I had not yet played. Mr. Harding cleared his throat. Aurora, earlier you mentioned there were historical concerns about these processes. Are you prepared to show them? I opened the binder's last section. 3 years ago, I filed a compliance report. It documented repeated failures and protocol-missed deadlines, inaccurate forecasts, and incomplete supplier communication logs. I slid the packet forward. This pattern did not begin today. Elise's voice wavered. This is ridiculous. That report was dismissed. Not dismissed, I said calmly. Ignored? Harding scanned the pages, his expression tightening. Another executive. Ms. Rowe leaned in. These issues match what we saw this week. Same projection errors, same unreturned messages. Elise shifted uncomfortably. I was under enormous pressure. Everyone cuts corners. Corners, Ms. Rowe repeated slowly. Cost us nearly $200,000 in penalties 2 years ago. Elise's face drained. Harding closed the report. This was a preventable failure, and not a sudden one. The room fell silent. Elise tried again. I can fix this. Give me a chance to correct. Before she could finish, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated, but Harding gestured for me to check it. A single email sat on my screen. From Monsieur Delatour, subject Aurora Hale. I opened it carefully. You were the only honest one in the room. If there is to be another discussion, you must lead it. I will not return unless you are the primary contact. I looked up slowly. Elise stared at me, her eyes wide. Panic and disbelief tangled together. The dynamic had shifted again, and she understood it now clearly, painfully. The title on her door still said manager, but the room no longer treated her like one. The board called an emergency evening session, the kind reserved for crises that threatened more than money. Elise arrived first, sitting stiffly at the far end of the long table. I entered a minute later, carrying only a single folder, no binder, no stack of evidence, just what mattered next. Maria Langston, the board chair, gestured to an empty seat near her. Aurora, let's begin. Elise bristled. I should be leading this discussion. This is my department. Maria didn't look at her. We have heard your version. Now we need solutions. I opened my folder. Monsieur Delatour sent a message. He will return only if I lead the negotiation. I slid the printed email forward. He will not work with us unless there is structural change. A low murmur ran down the table. I continued, my voice steady. I have a plan to salvage the relationship. It requires transparency in all data, direct communication without intermediaries, and a cultural framework that respects the norms Delatour maritime values. One board member leaned forward. Can you rebuild trust after what happened? Yes, I said, but only if we adjust how international negotiations are managed. Elise let out an incredulous laugh. She is exaggerating her importance. I didn't respond to her. To be clear, I said, looking only at the board, I cannot execute this plan under the current structure. Maria folded her hands. Explain. I will not work under Elise again. I said, not on this contract, not on any international account. Silence landed hard across the table. Elise's chair scraped as she shifted. You cannot make demands like that. I kept my gaze on the board. If we want to salvage this partnership, we must show Delatour Maritime that the person responsible for the failures is no longer directing the process. Another board member sat back slowly. This is a serious request. It is a necessary one, I replied. The tension in the room thickened, everyone weighing the cost of change against the cost of staying the same. The board's decision would determine far more than the fate of a single deal. Delatour returned earlier than anyone expected. No announcement, no formal scheduling. One moment the reception desk was quiet, and the next, he was standing in our hallway with a slim folder tucked under his arm. Elise hurried out of her office, smoothing her blazer. Monsieur Delatour, she said brightly. We can arrange a meeting room. I will. He walked right past her. His pace was steady, unhurried, as if he already knew exactly where he needed to be. He reached the conference room where the board was gathered and nodded politely before turning toward me. Madam Hale, he said, this is for you. He placed the folder in my hands. Inside was a revised contract terms adjusted. Penalties removed. Flexibility expanded. It was better than the previous draft in every meaningful way. Elise hovered behind him, her voice cracking. I do not understand. Why is she being handed documents meant for leadership? Delatour addressed the board. Not her. We negotiate with her. Maria Langston gestured for us to sit. Monsieur Delatour, are you certain this is how you want to proceed? Yes, he said. She respects the work. She tells the truth. I trust her. Elise let out a tight, brittle laugh. This is absurd. She is not qualified to lead international. My new office was smaller than Elise's old one, but for the first time in years, the door felt like it belonged to me. No one hovered outside it, waiting to hand me someone else's notes. No one used my space as a shortcut to their own authority. It overlooked the Charleston harbor, the same water I had grown up hearing from my childhood porch. But now the sound carried something different permission. Maria stopped by that morning with a thin envelope. Your updated title, she said. No announcement, just clarity. I opened it. Director of International Negotiations. Nothing flashy, just accurate. I trust you know what to do from here, she added. I do, I said. A soft knock followed after she left. Jordan stepped in, holding 2 resumes. You get to build your own team, he said. Who do you want? People who listen, I replied. People who finish what they start. He nodded. You'll be good at this. Aurora. Later. I reviewed the final version of the Delatour Maritime contract. The only American signature was mine. Delatour had added a handwritten note at the end. Respect builds bridges. My inbox pinged. A message from Elise. Subject, congrats. No body text, no apology, no explanation. I deleted it. The board had reassigned her to an internal workflow unit, no clients, no international work, no negotiations. A quiet end, delivered without spectacle. She would not lead another meeting that jeopardized anyone's work again. I stood and walked to the conference room, the same type of room I had once been told to leave. Today, 6 people were already gathered, seated and waiting. When I stepped inside, the chatter faded. Faces turned toward me, not curious, not skeptical, but expectant. I set my folder on the table. We have work to do, I said. No one asked me to get coffee, and I took the seat at the head of the table, because it was finally mine to claim. Maria raised a hand. Elise, enough. The room settled with a new kind of silence, one that pushed Elise to the margins without anyone needing to say it aloud. Another board member spoke. Given the circumstances and Monsieur Delatour's position, we will restructure oversight immediately. Elise looked between the faces around the table, waiting for someone to defend her. No one did. The weight of their silence pressed down until her shoulders dropped. Maria delivered the final line. You will transition to internal operations until further notice. Elise blinked, stunned, not fired, but removed, contained, finished. Delatour turned back to me. Shall we begin? And for the first time, I stepped fully into a room I had once been told to leave.